helping victims, going and talking with victims and trying to build a case. And that period was the beginning of the International Criminal Court starting the investigation in Congo. And they were really, really interested by meeting us. And we started something like a partnership with them. So, and my work was going, investigating, speaking with victims of all of these human rights abuses, rape, looting, sexual slaveries, and a lot more. And what I was doing to helping victims in filling out those kind of forms and trying to give more to people in the National Criminal Code information so they would be able to build cases with victims against those leaders of militia group. And one of the result of my work was that some of militia leaders were really, really involved on that crimes were arrested. So almost a guy named Thomas Mbanga, Bono Lawyer, and others. So, and in doing this work, so I decided to continue helping those victims in other part of Congo, because in Congo, I think it's one of the most dangerous states in the world, especially being a woman in a country like Congo. I think it's just hard and tough. I decided to go further and going in the South Kivu, in the North Kivu, one of the east region of my country, and going there and continue to do the same work. And when I was there and speaking with victims, I realized that many of our members of government, many of our, people working closely to the government were really, really involved in those crimes. And the main reason was just they were really, really interested in mineral resources, because Congo is one of the richest country in terms of mineral resources in the world. So in this part of the Congo, east part of Congo, there are a lot of mineral resources there. So people run the government, they're just going there, using militias, using the government forces to go there and to take people like in slavery and using them on those mineral resources. But the thing, and just one purpose is to make money. And I had the opportunity to meet a lot of women I have, and just speaking with them and trying to build some cases, bringing them to the National Criminal Code and trying to do advocacy in terms of urging the prosecutor for the National Criminal Code to issue some arrest warrant against member of the government. And that was, the main reason that I got arrested. Yeah, it was in November 2010. I was coming from a meeting, we were discussing how we can try to do advocacy in our House of Representatives to try to see if we can have a bill to implement the Rome Statute in the DRC. So the Rome Statute is the International Criminal Treaty. So I remember I rode a taxi with one of my colleagues, and when I get to the Boulevard Triomphal, is one of the huge boulevard in Congo. So that was where I saw a pickup coming and blocked us, and we were just taken from the taxi, and since then, that was just the beginning of a huge ordeal. I spent 5 days experiencing I think the worst I've been through it in doing my work as a human rights activist in Congo many times, but I've never experienced what I experienced. I heard from, victims I was talking with how they were suffering like rape, and it was really, really hard for me the first time to be a victim myself. That was really, really hard. I spent 5 days in prison, beaten, sexually abused. I know it's hard. It's hard when you are a lawyer. You could be living a normal life like other lawyers, and you're trying to decide that something has to be changed in the country. Why people can't live in the freedom like in the other places in the world. And it's possible to have that freedom, but there is just a group of people who are just selfish, don't like to see other people living in freedom. And doing what you think is just something just, and to be like punished for that, it's not easy. And it was really, really tough for me. Really, really tough for me. And I got just lucky. To be here in the United States and be able to speak here today. During my work as a human rights activist, I had the opportunity to work with many NGOs in the world. I was working on this network calling the Victim Rights Working Group. Through that network, and when they heard that I was in prison, they're trying to do their best to help me get out. And I was miraculously I get out from that prison. And they helped me get here in the United States, spend a week in Virginia, and got here in Dallas. And through some friends, through church, got to the Human Rights Initiative in North Texas. Started working with my case, and the very first barrier for an asylum seeker coming from a country where English is not a primary language, it's really, really tough. And when I got here in the United States, I wasn't speaking English. I know I went to school, I'm a lawyer, but I wasn't speaking English, I was speaking my French. It's really easy. And when you got here in the US, everything is in English. That's the first barrier. And the second one, I'm a lawyer by myself, and I learned a lot from my pro bono attorney I got through HRI. And right now I'm working in a law firm, trying to learn a little bit how the American judicial system works. That immigration law, it's just, it's hard. It's really hard. It's really hard. And I feel just lucky to have been able to go to HRI, to meet my pro bono attorneys from a really, really huge firm. It was Mason Elkins. I'm not doing any advertising about that. But yeah, but I got lucky. I got lucky to be able to be on my lawyers. And the hard thing also about my story is when I got here in the US, before I got here, the Republican Guard was a unity, the Guard unity of the current president in Congo. So they went through me when I left. And that moment my wife was pregnant. So I came here in the US, and behind me I left my wife pregnant, and my little boy was 2 years or 2 years and a half. And it was tough. It was really, really hard for a dad like me, for a human rights activist like me, standing up all day and being in this situation and not be able to just come with my wife and my boy. And spend almost a year here in the US fighting with HRI. And I finally got asylum, was November 3rd, 2011. And since then, starting to doing some job, I started working DiGeorgio-Lutz, just working, doing any other job, like cleaning. You know, it's, oh yeah, that's so good. I got this opportunity to working, the networking, and right now I'm a legal assistant and working in a law firm here in Dallas. You know what? It's really, really risky to be a human rights activist in Congo, and the people know that. And I'm telling you today, and there is a lot of human rights activists in Congo passed away. I remember one of my dear friend, Floribert Chebeya, who just killed. It was in June 2010. I was going in Kampala, and I met him a week before. I went in Kampala in Uganda. There was a review conference of the Rome Statute, and I went there. And when I was in Kampala, I just heard behind that my friend was killed by the chief of the police, just for the work of human rights, just for some reports, some press release. And I remember that we became a little bit acquainted with some professional of media, international media, like RFE's, Radio France International. I remember that one day, I'm just lucky because it's one of the evidence was used here in the US for my case. I remember that I do some interview that day, and I wasn't sure that interview could be one of my evidence here in the US, my own case. It was just really, really hard. Really, really, really hard to realize that people crave freedom. People, you know, they like to live in freedom, and they believe, like in Congo, that through freedom, people can reach development. Because when there is democracy, when there is a judicial system where people can be treated equally, when there is a law-based system, I think it's the most important thing people can have in a country. And I think it's a way to go through what we can call a welfare or a development. People believe that.
I'm going to ask you to stop there, and we'll come back. You'll have plenty of opportunity to ask Robert questions about his experiences. I want to move on now to JoAnn DiGeorgio-Lutz. And JoAnn, we're going to switch gears a little bit. So we've been speaking exclusively about human rights. And as a larger lens through which to view this, I was going to ask you to speak specifically to genocide and to define genocide. And then from there to talk briefly about what differentiates genocide from other human rights issues and violations, which our three other panelists have spoken about. And if there's time, while standing on one foot, if you could briefly discuss your experiences with human rights violations, and I'm thinking about your work on the Khmer Rouge and rebuilding societies from war, political violence, and internal displacement. But first, the genocide.
Okay. This is a great question. It's also one that perplexes us, especially when we teach courses on comparative genocide, on the Holocaust. We usually begin with a discussion of what is genocide, what constitutes it. As a baseline, we always refer to the Genocide Convention and the work of Raphael Lemkin, who actually defined the term for us. We know that Raphael Lemkin spent his entire life working for the ratification of the convention, which is ultimately its own victim of politics, which I'll get to in a second. But Lemkin really was trying to come up with something that would describe what he called initially crimes of barbarity and vandalism, and this destruction of cultures, which really plagued him. And I think it was Churchill who defined or said this defining the circumstances of the Holocaust in World War II that were really in the presence of a crime without a name. And this is what led Lemkin to come up with the term genocide, geno from the Latin race or tribe, and cide from the Latin to kill. It's the Greek and Latin combination. And for him, he actually modeled the term genocide on Eastman's word of Kodak, because he wanted a term that would not be mispronounced, that would not be misunderstood, and that when heard would chill the listener and compel states into action. So we get this convention, we get this legal document, which tells us basically the defining characteristics. It's a very short document that tells us that genocide is the act of killing a group in whole or in part, and the intent to destroy actually a group in whole or in part, either by causing bodily harm or physically removing the group, members of the group, etc. The problem is that the convention, while it is the baseline legal document that defines the international crime, it really didn't do much to stop genocide. Because if it was meant to echo never again, we got again and again. We got again with Rwanda, we got again with Cambodia, Guatemala, and so on. And so in terms of academics, when we began to study this genocide, not just the Holocaust but other genocides, the definition or the convention wasn't a sufficient definition to study the mass killing of people. And so various academics step into the fray, as we always do. We had sociologists, historians, political scientists, and everybody sort of came up with their own definition. And there's probably about, I would guesstimate, about 18 definitions of genocide out there. And so most characteristics include this idea of mass killing, usually state-sponsored, usually under the auspices of war, and so on. But it also includes, which I think is very important, groups that are political in nature. Because oftentimes what you would see are governments like Sudan or the Soviet Union, if you want to call the famine in Ukraine a genocide, often say that we're not targeting groups based on race or national identity or ethnicity, but we're targeting their actions because they're political opponents. And so that was okay for states to do that because they weren't violating the convention, the Genocide Convention. And so this is where academics came in and said that legal definition is not enough, that we need a more encompassing definitions that will hold states accountable to the acts committed against nationals or whomever that are found within their boundaries, especially if they are political groups. Where was I going with